Welcome to this edition of the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by PSEG Energy. PSEG Energy efficiency for game time and anytime. Visit pseg.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Charlotte Carey, the NFL Director of Broadcasting, as the NFL schedule has been released. I know something that you and many at the league office have been working tirelessly on for some time. Before we get into the Giants schedule, just how much time goes into putting together an NFL schedule for a season, all 32 teams? It must be like Jenga pieces.
It is literally like Jenga. First of all, thanks for having me, Madelyn. This is great. We're excited to be done. But it's a long process. Realistically, we start almost the day after the regular season ends. That's when we have kind of the final puzzle pieces of the standing space matchups and everything else for the following year. And we start tinkering at that point and really looking at different combinations, but we have to wait until we get through Super Bowl, because that's at least when we know who our kickoff game will be. This year will be the Chiefs hosting. So, that's when we really kind of lock ourselves in the room and start working, 12 to 24 hours a day from then on. So it's a pretty lengthy process. I think we're all a little bit tired here, but excited to be done and think that we came up with a great schedule.
Absolutely. And when we look at the Giants schedule, the Giants in recent years, but we're back on the Giants Cowboys week 1. What made this year the right time to reignite that?
It's a good question. It felt like a bit of a tradition for a few years, right? It was either kind of week 1 or 2, doubleheader, Sunday night, somewhere right in there. I think the NFC East is a super exciting division again, which is something that we love to see at the league office, and it makes our jobs a lot easier when we schedule. But the Giants last year were fun to watch. I think kind of came out of nowhere a bit for everybody, but really exciting. I actually grew up as a lifelong Giants fan, so personally, I was excited to see the Giants back in it. And getting back to kind of our tradition of Dallas Giants week 1 just felt right this year. We really liked it there. Thought it was a great opening game for NBC on their first Sunday night. So we got pretty comfortable with that pretty quickly.
It's interesting too, because when you are making these schedules and you're considering all these teams, you're also considering the venues, right? And Giants and Jets, of course, share MetLife Stadium. You've got Sunday night football for the Giants, followed by Monday night football with the Jets and the Bills. What goes into those conversations when you guys are putting this schedule together, saying, how can the venue take these things on?
Yeah, we definitely work closely with the venue, and they can do the one-day transformation. I think it's a late night and a lot of hours for some folks. So apologies to anyone who actually has to do the transition, but it's definitely, it can be done. The one positive is in New York, we've got 2 really fun, interesting teams this year. Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets makes them a totally dynamic, interesting team to watch also. So I think that for week 1 for us, it was fun to have both of those games in New York. Again, that nostalgic Dallas Giants kind of matchup that we've traditionally seen over the years. And then coming back with the Buffalo Jets, 2 division games in New York, both on opening weekend. It felt right for this year.
Absolutely. And that's, these venues are just so capable of so many incredible things. And it's just so cool to shine a light on what goes into that. Speaking of the Giants and the Jets, this is a matchup that we've got in the regular season, not just the preseason, as we've seen recently. This one comes in the middle of the year for these 2 teams, both with a lot of exciting plot lines, as you mentioned. How did you guys place that matchup?
We saw that matchup in a lot of different places. We saw it in primetime. We saw it. This one's going to be a 1:00 anchor on CBS in week, I think it's 8, I believe. We liked it. We kind of let that one float. It could have been on a Sunday night. It could have been on Monday night, Thursday night. We let that one float a bit. And to be honest with you, I think that this game, it's going to be a big anchor for CBS. It's going to go to probably, a large chunk of the country, I imagine, in week 8. It's kind of the battle for New York, right? Especially with both teams being fun and spunky this year. It definitely had a lot of different places it could fall. The 1:00 windows are something that we struggled a bit. We have a lot of national windows this year, and we really worked closely to try to make sure that our 1:00 windows had something of interest for all of our fans and all over the country. And this one was one that we felt it fell in a really good place where we could really use it in a widely distributed window and still have a fun 1:00 afternoon in New York.
Absolutely. And the 1:00 windows, are ones that you have to take care of, but also the primetime you mentioned. You've got Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, some big ticket games. And the Giants are in primetime a lot, especially early on in the season. the storylines, the narratives, what we saw from the Giants last year, is that what kind of goes into putting this team in the front and center?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll notice right here, right? The Giants have, is it 3 of their first 4 in prime time? They're a team that we are definitely using in a lot of prime and doubleheader and national windows this year. And on Christmas, we're excited about the Giants. We're excited about the whole division. I think the NFC East will be fun. The AFC should be fun too. I think that, both New York teams again should be interesting and hopefully in this thing. But the Giants we're definitely relying on and counting on this year. And you'll see that by looking at their schedule.
It's great too. The Christmas Day, you mentioned the rivalry games, right? You've got Giants, Eagles, got a couple rivalry games on Christmas.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of a spicy matchup day for the NFL.
It's a spicy matchup day. We actually really liked this schedule because of the way Christmas laid out. There are a lot of things that we liked about this particular one, but one of the main focuses was Christmas. We thought it was great to start the day with a Vegas Kansas City game, another divisional matchup. Hopefully will be great at that point in the season. Follow it up with Giants Eagles, and then end the day with Baltimore San Fran. We really like the way that set up from a full, kind of cap to the Christmas weekend. There are a lot of windows on Christmas weekend, and that made for a fun and spicy, if you will, Christmas Day.
Absolutely. One of the things that sticks out to me as somebody who's covering the Giants, who's invested in this team, is the schedule, the beginning of the schedule. 7 times on the road in the first 10 weeks of the season. This is the first time since the NFL reinstated bye weeks in 1990. And it's happened that many road games that early on. What went into this decision? How do you guys look at that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So 7 over their first 11. The way that you can look at this, first of all, is if you look in weeks 2 and 3, the Arizona and San Fran games, those are actually paired trips. So the Giants actually wanted, they have a few West Coast trips this year, and they were hoping to pair a couple of those trips. So if you take that into account, that's 2 of those road games. And actually, something that's interesting that we did this year that we worked with the team on, usually you can't go 3 time zones for Thursday night game. Week 3, their game in San Francisco is a Thursday night game, something we really liked on the Amazon schedule. So we talked to the team about potentially going out and staying and shortening their road trip over there, not staying a full week over on the West Coast, to see if they had any interest in staying a few days shorter potentially and playing a Thursday night game while they're out there and then coming home to their mini bye, if you will, right after that. And there was definite interest on the Giants side. So that piece of it, it's number one, it was interesting for us to get that Thursday night game. Usually we don't have access to those 3 time zone Thursday night games. But then beyond that, to be able to do their paired trip, something that they really wanted to do early in the season, it felt like a good place for that early in the year, get it out of the way. And then you follow it up and you have a couple of road trips that maybe want to, it just is what it is. Teams fall with 3-game road trips once in a while. There are 5 teams that have 3-game road trips this year. But if you look at it on the other side, they've got 2 road trips from week 12 on. So, looking at the playoff push and everything else, it actually may set up pretty well for them in the back half of the year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like the perspective that you're giving too, because a lot of fans out there look at this and think that the league just says, here you go, here's what you're doing this year. But it's not that case at all. You are working very closely with all of these clubs and making sure that it works with what they want to do and getting input and feedback too, which again, I can't even imagine having that many conversations going on simultaneously, trying to make all the pieces fit. But the way that you guys are able to do that and this team is able to do that is incredible. Yeah. And so, as these conversations are going on and, how many iterations of an NFL schedule do you guys come down to as you are pairing it out or saying, okay, here's some options?
Yeah. So it's a good question. We saw over, I think it was like 112,000 or more finished playable schedules. We do kind of a deep dive, if you will, and do a full analyzation, which takes kind of a few hours per schedule, on probably 400 of them. So we definitely, it's a bit of Groundhog Day. We'll start there. The whole process, we look through all these schedules and find things that essentially we really like or really don't like and write rules about them, and then keep iterating on that process day after day after day until we get towards the end. One of the fun things this year that we did a bit differently is we kind of locked things out versus locking them in. In the past, we've gotten pretty narrow towards the end and we're going down one path. We saw a lot of different looks this year and tried a little bit of a different strategy, which, you know, I think actually worked out in spades. We saw a lot more of the search space and we're able to see very different looks on different games and primetime windows, and otherwise the overall structure of the schedule could shift up until the end. And that was something that was a different approach this year that Mike North really wanted to take, and really I think ended up really paying off in spades.
Absolutely. And, you know, you speak about to the end of the season and the end of the year, and as things kind of take a different shape, you've got a lot of flex options through the end of the season for each of these teams. What goes into those decisions at those points? Not just obviously how well the teams are playing, but I'm sure there are other elements.
Yeah, you know, the flex decisions, I think in a perfect world, we'll leave every game where it is, and our crystal ball would have been great in May, and we'll leave everything as is. But, you know, the opportunity for flex, I would say particularly for teams to play their way on, that may not have been a huge draw as we're sitting here in May, but you have some of these teams with new young quarterbacks that may have an opportunity to play their way on later in the year, or new storylines that emerge, or a game that just fell apart that we were hoping would be good when we got there and wasn't as great as we were hoping it would be. There are definitely different factors that we take into account when it comes to flex scheduling, but obviously we factor in also the fan impact and everything else that, it's a big decision when we decide to actually flex out of a game. Last year, we flexed a little bit more than we usually do. I would say, that's not a new norm. We're not looking to flex more. I think in a perfect world, as I just said, in May, our crystal ball works and we'll leave everything where it is, but we do have those levers to pull if we need them.
I think too that it's got to be so fascinating for you, especially. But growing up a Giants fan, Charlotte, I'm curious: is there a game that you just cannot wait for? Is there a game that you have circled that you're like, this is going to be a good one?
You know what? I think it's interesting. I think there are different points in the season for different games. I'm really excited for week one. I think week one is always, to me, the most exciting week of the season. Yeah. Nobody has a losing record. Everyone's coming in fresh. You're wondering who these teams are every year. So I think the way that we structured week one is actually fairly fascinating, especially with like a Detroit, Kansas City, maybe not, a typical choice or what everyone was expecting for kickoff, but the way that we left the season last year with Detroit knocking Green Bay out of the playoffs and Detroit kind of coming on strong in that second half of the year and coming off Hard Knocks and in the early fall, they were a fun story. And so Detroit's definitely earned the spotlight and earned their way into that game. So that's kind of something that I'm excited about, just who everybody is week one, ending the season kind of with Detroit on that high note and starting them in week one against Kansas City, we thought was a fun and somewhat different approach than we've taken in the past. And then you go into some of these, divisional matchups that we had talked about with Dallas Giants and Buffalo Jets. But then you also look at the game like Green Bay, Chicago. Who is Green Bay in week one? Who is Green Bay with Jordan Love? You don't have Aaron Rodgers anymore. So there's a lot of interest in storylines as we head into week one.
Absolutely. I cannot wait. Week one is going to be, a couple months away, but we are looking forward to it. Charlotte Carey, thank you so much for taking the time, breaking this all down for us. This is a fascinating world of building an NFL schedule, and you guys have done a great job.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in to the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by PSEG, energy efficiency for game time and anytime. Visit pseg.com/Giants for discounts, rebates, and home energy assessments. And don't forget, limited Giants single game tickets are on sale now. Visit giants.com/tickets.